Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grant, and this is the Parenting Through Challenges podcast, where we talk about all things parenting, but perhaps with a unique perspective. I know that the things that I share here on this podcast don't match at all the way that I parented when my kids were younger, and in particular, my son. My son, who joined my family by my choice when we adopted him. And I made this promise to his mom that I was going to love him unconditionally and provide him a safe and loving home. And of course, on the surface, I did, right? He had clothes and food and family and celebrations and all of the things. But there's something about the way that I parented that made our relationship extremely hard. And I'm not saying that to beat myself up. I'm I'm sharing that with you because I know that I'm not alone. I know that the things that I experienced in my relationship with my son are, although they were very unique to me and our relationship, I know that they're common struggles that a lot of other parents experience. But it's something that we don't tend to talk about. We don't tend to talk about our experience as a parent. We tend to talk about our kids' behaviors. I know that's what I spewed many, many words about over campfires and dinners with friends and desperate phone calls in the middle of the day and even spilling my stories on coworkers were all about my son's behaviors. And not really. I mean, I reflected on my approach a lot. I asked a lot of questions from experts and dug in deep. So many trainings and certifications and books and oh my goodness, the amount of trainings that I took to try to understand. But I never really fully understood that it was who I was being. And who I was being was somebody who was living out my conditioned experience. So what do I mean by that? Well, as I've been sharing here with you on this podcast, we all have a unique energetic blueprint. And our purpose on this planet is to step fully into it. No matter whether or not we're doing this interpersonal work or we're living by default or somewhere in between, we're always living out our purpose. Our purpose is us being us. But understanding our human design gives us this blueprint to tap into the higher frequencies of who we are, who we've always been. We've just forgotten because life happens to us, to all of us. Life happens. We take in these stories from our experiences, from our observations, from words that we have heard and felt in our body. And we take in these experiences and they shape the way that we are. They shape the way that we show up as parents. At the core of what I do in my work is helping parents to understand their stories and then use tools like human design, like some nervous system regulation tools such as EFT to help release those old stories so that we can really fully step into the parents that we have always meant to be, but we've been maybe, I don't know, hidden or clouded in our view because of all of our conditioning. But that's not exactly what I wanted to talk about in this episode today. I wanted to share, I don't know, maybe remind why I'm here, why I am here talking with you about parenting and why I find human design so incredibly important. I think when we know what the compass is showing us, where we were meant to be going all along, it helps us get back on track. It helps us have increased awareness about what those stories are that are holding us back, and then helps us show up differently for our kids and ourselves. It's us first, right? We have to take care of ourselves first. We have to take care of our own energy needs first so we can show up for our kids. It actually becomes really easy to show up in the way that we want when we start taking care of our own energy needs. It's not a struggle so much anymore. I'm not saying that by understanding your human design, you won't ever struggle again. It's definitely not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that when we're trying to accomplish goals, while also being out of alignment with ourselves. It's like trying to drive from here to the grocery store when your car's out of alignment. You'll get there, but it's going to be hard the whole way. You're going to keep struggling with your car in the same way that your body is struggling with your misalignment with your energy. So back to what I was saying earlier, that there's something about the way that I was being with my son that when I look back, when I really reflect on where things were so incredibly hard, I really feel like I can pinpoint it to one specific energy in my chart. It's the gate 59.6 or the channel 59.6. Sorry. And I'm not blaming that channel by any means. In fact, it is a beautifully powerful channel. It is the channel that gives us the ability to deeply and intimately connect with others. I think that when I'm in my highest frequency, it is why I care so deeply about the people in my life, about the people that I work with, about the clients that I encounter. When I, do a mini workshop and I get to meet somebody for, 45 minutes to an hour, and I connect so deeply with them. And I attribute it to my 59.6 channel. It has this beautiful ability to connect so deeply. And when on the shadow end, it has this ability to put up walls. In particular, it's the gate 6. So the gate 6 is all about connecting at a deep, intimate level. But when we're in that shadow side, it can come out in one of two ways. And one of the ways I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I did an episode all about yelling and punishment and the impact that that has on our kids. And that's what this gate 6 or its energy can really look like on the reactive side. It can look like emotional reacting to things that are showing up in our life. Not that I think it's that simple, right? I know that when we're more reactive, it is also a reflection of our nervous system being dysregulated, which is why EFT is a part of what I do. But this gate in particular has the energy to either be reactive or to be repressive. And in that repressive nature of this particular energy is this strong, deep desire to keep the peace, to at the expense of all things that are part of your goal. And so, what do I mean by that? Well, I learned from a very young age, for lots of reasons, that I was best suited to keep the peace, to be well behaved and to follow the rules and to be, quote unquote, the good kid is how I was able to protect myself from emotional pain. And it became a part of my identity. It became a part of my reaction to the fear of having my heart broken, is that my go-to is not yelling. My kids could probably tell you that I can count on one hand the number of times that I've yelled at my kids. I'm not a yeller. I don't react in that way. And I'm not saying that because I'm better than you if you're a yeller. Not at all. This is the way that my nervous system has responded to emotional pain, emotional fear, is that my nervous system, my body, instead of going to the reactive yelling way of handling frustration with my kids or other people in my life, is my nervous system on the flip side puts up a very quick brick wall. And what that looked like in my parenting experience with my kids is that instead of yelling, I would turn to silence. That silence that I would use with my kids, because I didn't know, I didn't know then what I know now about my energy needs, but it was such a trained behavior in me to create the peace. And so I instinctually, reactively, when things would get tough, I would shut down and I would be silent. And of course, in my head, I was you know, thinking about my kids and loving my kids and trying to problem solve how to support them. But what they saw from me was pure silence. And that silence can, in many ways, be more painful to our kids. It can create this feeling in our kids that they're being rejected. It can create this story for our kids that they're not worthy of love unless they're behaving. When we as parents are using silence to as our response to our kids' behaviors, it can create this space that isn't just about our kids saying that they did something wrong or they made a mistake, but our silence as parents can give this message that they are wrong or that there's something bad about them. When this is our parenting approach and we don't have an awareness of it, it creates this space for our kids where they feel emotionally unsafe because we feel emotionally unsafe. It seemed when I look back to being a mom and being so incredibly overwhelmed, I was telling myself a story that I was keeping the peace at home. I was doing whatever I needed to do to not create more chaos. I knew that my son had a really tricky past, and I didn't want to add to that by yelling. I convinced myself and had lots of outside feedback to say, wow, it's so, I can't, how do you not yell at him? How do you not lose your cool with him? I almost took pride in my ability to use silence as a parenting strategy. And it wasn't an intentional strategy by any means, but it was my nervous system's way of keeping the peace. My nervous system was afraid of what if I engaged? What if I said words that caused him pain, caused him distress, created a harder situation for him? Meanwhile, the message I was giving him was perhaps you're not important enough for my words. And I'm not sharing this with you to beat yourself up if you are like me and silence is your go-to. I'm sharing this with you so that you can have an increased awareness about different ways to approach. Because I know that there are plenty of parents out there that shut down when things get hard with their kids or with their co-parent, right? With your partner, that many of us shut down. I think that there are a couple of reasons. I identified that gate 6 or the channel 59.6, I think is a huge part of this. I have two channels in my design, and this is one of them. This ability to maintain the peace at all costs, which can be such a gift when I'm using it well. And it is also my greatest area of challenge and struggle in my life is learning how to be emotionally vulnerable, how to put myself out there, how to use words to connect instead of using silence to cut out. Because I think, we think about this idea of fear, right? We as humans, we're designed to have very particular responses to fear for good reason, right? We're supposed to react to fear if there's a bear and we're in the woods and we're in danger, right? We're supposed to react to fear, and our body's supposed to kick in quick as quick to help us do what we need to do. But because of the way that humans are designed, we have a ridiculous amount of other fears, and they're not real, they're perceived fears. Those other fears that we have experiences cause the same type of reaction in our body, oftentimes as if we're being chased by a bear, but there's no bear around. They're just perceived fears. And so when I think about this concept, one of my perceived fears was of being hurt, of being perhaps abandoned or let down by somebody I love. And that somebody was my son. So if silence is your go-to strategy, if you reflect on what you do when your kids act out, I encourage you to, with with all gentleness, I encourage you to take a step back and acknowledge that this is a pattern that you have as part of your repertoire. It is a pattern that you have well established, not because you don't care, not because your kids don't matter to you, not because you don't love the heck out of them, but because it's a protective measure that your brain has put in place to keep you safe, safe from whatever that fear might be of yours. But that doesn't have to be the end of the story. You get to choose to take different action. You get to choose to start working on different ways to respond to your kiddo. In the same way that if you are somebody who reacts through yelling, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. When we take into account what our kids need emotionally from us, which can seem like such a weight to bear, but when we start to realize that we're bearing so much more weight through these protective measures, right? I was holding all of the weight of trying to keep the peace and not upset anybody by keeping silence. And the consequence was huge, not only for myself, but for my son, for my daughter, for my partner, for all of us. In my desperate fear, my need to keep the peace, I created so much more chaos because I was trying so hard to hold it all together for everybody. But nobody else's feelings are my responsibility. My responsibility as mom is to do my best to support all areas of development of my kids, which includes their social emotional development. So, what do we get to do about this, right? I'd like to share something practical that you can do because, again, this doesn't have to be the end of the story in your relationship for your kiddo. So, here's my challenge for you. If you are a parent who goes to silence, if that is your well-established pattern of responding, and oh, I started to say, but it isn't just about the gate six. It's also part of my line two and my line five. Both of those energies in my profile can tend to be more withdrawn and can tend to retreat when things get challenging, can tend to want to hold back until I'm being specifically asked or given something to respond to. And so there are many parts of my design. Those are just a couple, but there's so many more that create this space where keeping the peace is definitely my jam. But it doesn't have to be the end of the story for me. And my way of keeping the peace wasn't actually keeping the peace. It was just making things worse because again, I now look back and I think I created this space where my son didn't, he feared abandonment. He feared that he wasn't good enough. He probably feared that he wasn't lovable enough for me to engage in a loving way with him. And so here are some things that you can consider trying when you tend to withdraw when your kiddo misbehaves. You still hold boundaries, right? You still get to decide what feels right to you. You always get to decide that. But it doesn't have to be an either or. What would happen if you said something like, I'm feeling frustrated right now, but I still love you. Or let's together take a minute to calm ourselves down so we can come back together. Or I need to breathe so that I can regulate myself, and then I'd like to talk. When we use words to let our kids know what we are experiencing and that it isn't their fault, it isn't about them, and it isn't impacting the way that we love them, it isn't impacting the way that we view them. When we use words to say, I'm experiencing something and I still love you, or I'm experiencing something and I'm still here for you. When we can use words like that with our kids and work on regulating ourselves and then follow through and show up for them, it can have a profound impact on their social emotional well-being, on your relationship with them, and letting go of that burden of trying to hold it all on your shoulders, in trying to hold the weight of everybody else's emotions. Their emotions are not yours to hold. So let them go. Take full responsibility for your own emotions. step into the higher frequency of connecting and see what changes in your family. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. I'd love to hear how you're implementing these strategies in your home and what's happening for you in your family. I'd love to hear what comes up for you. So until the next episode, be well and sending you much love.